"Stay back," Rex growled, his voice a low, menacing rumble that echoed through the silent woods. His battered frame, scarred and trembling, stood like a fortress between the circling coyotes and the fragile bundle behind him. The alpha coyote stepped forward, its yellow eyes gleaming with hunger, lips curling into a vicious snarl. Rex's ears flattened, his body tensing as he let out another warning growl. The baby's faint cry pierced the standoff, a sound so fragile that it ignited a fire deep within Rex. He knew he couldn't fail. Not this time. The coyotes lunged as one. Rex launched himself forward, jaws snapping, teeth clashing against fur and bone. Pain tore through his side as sharp fangs found purchase, but Rex refused to relent. His strength ebbed with each blow, but his resolve grew fiercer. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a battle for something greater. To understand why Rex fought so fiercely, the narrative interjects, we must first see where his journey began. Rex hadn't always been a protector. In the shadows of an old, forgotten backyard, he had once been a tool, a fighter thrown into battles for sport, his scars a map of human cruelty. He remembered the ring, the deafening roar of the crowd, the metallic scent of blood, and the searing pain of claws and teeth. "You're worthless now," his owner had sneered one day, tossing him into the wild as though discarding garbage. Hunger became his companion, and loneliness his only shelter. But even as the wilderness chipped away at his strength, something within him refused to break. Then, one fateful evening, a scent drifted to him, soft, warm, and unlike anything he had known. His instincts sharpened as he followed it through the underbrush, each step heavy with uncertainty. Rex froze when he saw the bundle, a baby, tiny and helpless, wrapped in a fraying blanket. Its cries were faint, but they echoed in his chest like a roar. For a moment, he hesitated, torn between hunger and something he couldn't name. Then the baby whimpered again, and Rex's purpose crystallized. That night, beneath a canopy of stars, he curled his body around the infant, shielding it from the chill. His stomach growled, but he ignored the pangs, nudging the baby's blanket closer. In that moment, the fighter's instincts softened, replaced by something far stronger, an unyielding need to protect. And so began a journey, the narrative continues. One that would test Rex's strength, his resolve, and the very depths of his heart. Rex hadn't always been a protector. In the shadows of an old, forgotten backyard, he had once been a tool, a fighter thrown into battles for sport, his scars a map of human cruelty. He remembered the ring, the deafening roar of the crowd, the metallic scent of blood, and the searing pain of claws and teeth. Each fight stripped away another piece of him, until there was little left but a survival instinct, raw and unrelenting. One day, that instinct almost betrayed him. "You're worthless now," his owner had sneered, the words cold and final. A boot to his side sent Rex tumbling out of the truck and onto a dirt road. The vehicle sped off, leaving him coughing in a cloud of dust, the realization settling in. He was alone, abandoned like broken furniture. The days that followed were a blur of desperation. Hunger gnawed at him, and the once mighty frame that had earned him victories in the ring now dragged through the wilderness. He scavenged where he could, licking at discarded scraps and drinking from muddy puddles. The nights were worse, cold and merciless, the wind slicing through his thin coat like knives. Yet, even as the wilderness chipped away at his strength, something deep inside him refused to break. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, a new scent wafted toward him on the breeze. It was faint but unmistakable, warm, soft, and so unlike the harsh smells of the wild. Rex's nose twitched, his ears perking, his instincts sharpened, propelling him forward through the underbrush. The forest closed in around him, shadows deepening as he pressed on, the scent growing stronger with each step. He stopped abruptly. There, lying in the middle of the clearing, was the source of the scent, a baby. tiny, fragile, and wrapped in a fraying blanket. Its cries were weak, barely more than whispers, but they echoed in his chest like a roar. Rex stared, his body rigid. His hunger clawed at him, the primal urge to survive surging in his veins. Yet, as he stepped closer, the baby's faint whimper pierced through the fog of his instincts. For the first time in his life, he hesitated. The baby turned its head, its small face scrunched in discomfort, and Rex felt something shift inside him. He couldn't name it, but it was strong, undeniable. The child was helpless, abandoned, just like he had been. With a low, uncertain whine, he crouched down, his nose brushing the edge of the blanket. The baby's warmth seeped into him, and an unfamiliar sense of purpose stirred in his chest. That night, beneath a canopy of stars, Rex made his decision. He curled his battered body around the infant, shielding it from the chill. His stomach growled, but he ignored the pangs, nudging the baby's blanket closer with his nose. As the baby's cries quieted and its breathing steadied, Rex rested his head on his paws, keeping his amber eyes fixed on the darkness beyond. For the first time, the fighter's instincts softened, replaced by something far stronger, an unyielding need to protect. In that moment, the bond was forged, and a new chapter of his life began, one he never could have imagined. Rex hadn't always been a protector. In the shadows of an old, forgotten backyard, he had once been a tool, a fighter thrown into battles for sport. His scars a map of human cruelty. He remembered the ring, the deafening roar of the crowd, the metallic scent of blood, and the searing pain of claws and teeth. Each fight stripped away another piece of him until there was little left but a survival instinct, raw and unrelenting. One day that instinct almost betrayed him. "You're worthless now," his owner had sneered, the words cold and final. A boot to his side sent Rex tumbling out of the truck and onto a dirt road. The vehicle sped off, leaving him coughing in a cloud of dust. The realization settling in, he was alone, abandoned like broken furniture. The days that followed were a blur of desperation. Hunger gnawed at him, and the once mighty frame that had earned him victories in the ring now dragged through the wilderness. He scavenged where he could, licking at discarded scraps and drinking from muddy puddles. The nights were worse, cold and merciless, the wind slicing through his thin coat like knives. Yet, even as the wilderness chipped away at his strength, something deep inside him refused to break. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, a new scent wafted toward him on the breeze. It was faint but unmistakable, warm, soft, and so unlike the harsh smells of the wild. Rex's nose twitched, his ears perking, his instincts sharpened, propelling him forward through the underbrush. The forest closed in around him, shadows deepening as he pressed on, the scent growing stronger with each step. He stopped abruptly. There, lying in the middle of the clearing, was the source of the scent. A baby, tiny, fragile, and wrapped in a fraying blanket. Its cries were weak, barely more than whispers, but they echoed in his chest like a roar. Rex stared, his body rigid. His hunger clawed at him, the primal urge to survive surging in his veins. Yet, as he stepped closer, the baby's faint whimper pierced through the fog of his instincts. For the first time in his life, he hesitated. The baby turned its head, its small face scrunched in discomfort, and Rex felt something shift inside him. He couldn't name it, but it was strong, undeniable. The child was helpless, abandoned, just like he had been. With a low, uncertain whine, he crouched down, his nose brushing the edge of the blanket. The baby's warmth seeped into him, and an unfamiliar sense of purpose stirred in his chest. That night, beneath a canopy of stars, Rex made his decision. He curled his battered body around the infant, shielding it from the chill. His stomach growled, but he ignored the pangs, nudging the baby's blanket closer with his nose. As the baby's cries quieted and its breathing steadied, Rex rested his head on his paws, keeping his amber eyes fixed on the darkness beyond. For the first time, the fighter's instincts softened, replaced by something far stronger, an unyielding need to protect. In that moment, the bond was forged, and a new chapter of his life began, one he never could have imagined. Rex's journey had only just begun. As dawn broke the next day, he stirred, his body stiff from the cold ground but his resolve stronger than ever. The baby's tiny breaths were steady now, but its cries had grown weaker, a reminder of how fragile this life was. Rex's ears twitched as he scanned the clearing, his senses sharpening. He needed to find food, not for himself, but for the infant that had somehow become his responsibility. The forest was quiet, the early morning light filtering through the dense canopy above. Rex nudged the baby's blanket gently, his nose brushing its tiny cheek as if to reassure it that he would return. With a final glance, he padded into the underbrush, his nose low to the ground and his ears perked. Every rustle of leaves, every faint scent carried on the breeze, sharpened his focus. After hours of searching, Rex found a small stream winding through the woods. He lapped at the cool water, his dry throat grateful for the reprieve. But his priority was clear. Nearby, a blackberry bush caught his attention. The fruit was sparse, the berries small and tart, but it was something. He carefully picked a few with his teeth, holding them gently as he made his way back to the clearing. When he returned, the baby's cries had grown faint, its small body trembling under the thin blanket. Rex nudged the berries closer, instinctively trying to offer them to the infant. Of course, the child was too young to eat on its own, but the act was more than survival. It was care, an effort to provide for something other than himself. That night, as the stars blinked overhead, Rex lay curled around the baby once more, his body a protective barrier against the cold. His ears twitched at every sound in the darkness, his instincts on high alert. The baby shifted slightly in its sleep, its tiny hand brushing against his scarred side. A low whine escaped Rex's throat, a sound of both concern and newfound devotion. As the hours passed, Rex's mind wandered. He thought of the ring, of the life he had known before, a life of pain, of fighting for nothing but survival. Now, he fought for something far greater. The child's fragile existence had given him purpose, a reason to keep going, no matter the odds. If this story has touched your heart so far, don't forget to share it with someone who believes in the power of loyalty and second chances. Subscribe to our channel to follow more stories that remind us of the resilience and love that can be found in the most unexpected places. Together, let's celebrate the bonds that make life worth fighting for. Rex's journey grew more perilous with each passing day. The forest, though a sanctuary, was also a place of lurking dangers. The third night brought a chilling wind, carrying with it the faint howls of predators. Rex's ears perked, his body tensing as he pressed closer to the baby. The sound was distant but unmistakable, coyotes. He stood, his muscles stiff but ready, scanning the darkness with sharp amber eyes. The baby stirred in its sleep, and Rex nudged the blanket tighter around it before stepping toward the edge of the clearing. The howls grew louder, closer, the sound of paws crunching against leaves sending his instincts into overdrive. He let out a low, warning growl, his body a wall between the approaching danger and the child he had vowed to protect. The first coyote emerged, its yellow eyes gleaming in the moonlight. It was lean and hungry, its movements cautious, but predatory. Behind it, two more shapes materialized, their growls low and menacing. Rex stood his ground, his lips curling to reveal sharp teeth. A deep, guttural bark erupted from his throat, a clear warning that he would not back down. The coyotes circled, testing his resolve. One lunged forward, snapping at his flank, but Rex twisted, his jaws clamping down on the predator's shoulder. The coyote yelped, retreating into the shadows, but the others pressed in. Another leapt, its teeth grazing Rex's side, drawing blood. Pain flared, but Rex didn't falter. He fought with a ferocity born not of survival, but of love. Every growl, every snap of his jaws was a declaration: this child would not be harmed. After what felt like an eternity, the coyotes retreated, their snarls fading into the night. Rex stood panting, his body trembling from the effort. Blood stained his fur, but his focus remained on the baby. He limped back to the bundle, lowering himself beside it with a soft whine. The child's breathing was steady, its tiny hand clutching the edge of the blanket. Exhaustion weighed heavy on Rex, but relief surged through him. They had survived, together. As dawn broke, casting golden light over the clearing, Rex knew they couldn't stay here. The forest had proven dangerous, and the baby needed more than he could provide. Summoning the last of his strength, he nudged the child's blanket into place and gently lifted the bundle in his jaws. Step by step, he moved forward, determined to find shelter, safety, and a chance for a better life for them both. Rex's path led him deeper into the forest, his pace slow but steady. Each step was a battle against his own exhaustion, but he kept moving. By midday, the trees thinned, revealing a narrow dirt path winding through the wilderness. It smelled faintly of humans, and with it came hope. He followed the trail, his ears flicking at every sound. The baby's soft coos and whimpers were the only thing keeping him going. The path led him to an abandoned cabin, its roof sagging under years of neglect. The door creaked as Rex nudged it open with his nose, revealing a dusty but dry interior. He placed the baby gently on the floor, arranging the blanket around it before collapsing beside the bundle. His body ached, his wounds stung, but for the first time in days, they had shelter. Rex's ears twitched as he heard faint footsteps crunching outside. His body tensed, his growl low and warning. A shadow passed the broken window, and moments later, a soft voice called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" Rex stood protectively over the baby, his amber eyes locked on the figure stepping cautiously through the doorway. A woman, dressed in hiking gear, froze as she saw him. Her gaze shifted to the baby, her expression softening. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What's happened here?" Rex growled, but the woman knelt slowly, her hands raised in surrender. "It's okay," she said gently. "I'm here to help." Her voice was calm, soothing, and Rex's growl subsided, though he remained alert. The woman reached into her pack, pulling out a bottle of water and a small towel. "Let me help the baby," she murmured. Rex watched her every move, his body a tense barrier between her and the child. But as she carefully cleaned the baby's face and offered it water, he sensed her sincerity. For the first time, he allowed himself to relax, just slightly. The woman glanced at him, her eyes filled with awe. "You've been protecting this baby, haven't you?" she said softly. "You're a hero." Rex didn't understand her words, but the tone was enough. His tail thumped once against the floor, a small acknowledgement of her kindness. Together, they worked to care for the baby, the woman's gentle hands and Rex's unwavering vigilance creating an unspoken bond. For the first time in a long while, Rex felt he wasn't alone. The woman introduced herself as Claire. Over the next few hours, she worked diligently to provide what little comfort she could to the baby. She fed it with a makeshift bottle fashioned from her water supply and a small cloth. As the infant's cries subsided into soft coos, Claire turned her attention to Rex. "You're hurt," she said, her voice full of concern. Rex flinched slightly as she reached for his side, where a coyote's bite had torn into his skin. Claire's movements were gentle as she inspected the wound, muttering to herself about needing proper supplies. "You've done so much already. Let me help you now." Rex's amber eyes studied her intently. He could feel her kindness, her sincerity, and he allowed her to clean his wounds using a small first aid kit she had in her pack. The sting of antiseptic made him growl softly, but he remained still, understanding her intent. As the afternoon waned, Claire looked at the baby bundled safely in its blanket, and then back at Rex. "We can't stay here," she said softly. "The baby needs medical attention, and you need a place where you can heal too." Her words stirred something in Rex. He stepped closer to the baby, his body instinctively shielding it as if to say he wasn't leaving without it. Claire smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "I know," she whispered. "We'll go together." Gathering her things, Claire carefully lifted the baby into her arms. Rex stayed close, his body tense but trusting. Together, they stepped out of the cabin and onto the trail. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Rex felt a glimmer of hope. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were moving towards something better. Claire led them through the dense forest, following the trail that eventually widened into a dirt path. The baby nestled in her arms had fallen into a peaceful sleep, its tiny breaths a comforting rhythm. Rex stayed at her side, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. Despite his exhaustion, he remained vigilant, every step an act of silent devotion. Hours later, they reached the edge of the forest. Beyond it, a small rural town stretched out under the golden glow of sunset. Claire let out a sigh of relief, her gaze sweeping over the scene. "We made it," she said softly, glancing down at Rex. "Let's find someone who can help." As they entered the town, curious eyes followed their every move. A woman carrying a baby, accompanied by a scarred but regal-looking dog, was an unusual sight. Claire approached the first house she saw, a modest structure with a garden full of blooming flowers. She knocked on the door, and an older man answered, his expression wary at first but softening as he took in the scene. "Please," Claire began, her voice tinged with urgency. "We need help. This baby and this dog, they've been through so much." The man nodded, stepping aside to let them in. Inside, the warmth of a crackling fireplace enveloped them, and Claire carefully placed the baby on a couch. Rex stayed close, his body tense but his eyes reflecting a deep weariness. The man introduced himself as Henry and quickly fetched supplies to clean Rex's wounds and prepare formula for the baby. As the evening wore on, the story unfolded. Claire explained how she had found Rex and the baby, her voice breaking as she described Rex's unwavering protection. Henry listened intently, his eyes flicking to Rex with admiration. "You've got yourself a guardian angel here," he said, reaching out to scratch behind Rex's ears. Rex leaned into the touch, a rare moment of vulnerability. By the time the stars lit up the sky, the baby was fed and sleeping soundly, and Rex was resting near the fireplace, his wounds cleaned and bandaged. Claire sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his head. "You saved that baby," she whispered. "You're a hero, Rex, and I'll make sure you're never alone again." In that quiet moment, surrounded by warmth and safety, Rex closed his eyes, a sense of peace washing over him for the first time in what felt like forever. He had found something he never thought possible, a family. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a golden glow over the small living room. The baby stirred first, its soft coos breaking the silence. Rex lifted his head, his amber eyes scanning the room as he instinctively checked for any sign of danger. But the house was calm. For once, there was no threat lurking in the shadows. Claire entered the room carrying a warm bottle of milk for the baby. She smiled as she saw Rex watching her, his gaze steady and full of quiet trust. "Good morning, buddy," she said softly, kneeling beside him to check his bandages. "You're healing up nicely. Strong as ever, aren't you?" Rex let out a low huff, leaning into her touch as she carefully adjusted the wrappings on his side. The wounds were closing well, thanks to her diligent care. The baby's soft giggles drew Claire's attention, and she reached over to cradle the infant, feeding it gently. "You two make quite the team," she murmured, her voice filled with admiration. "I don't know how you managed it, Rex, but you saved this little one." As the day unfolded, Claire began making plans. She knew she couldn't keep the baby. It needed medical attention, a proper home, and authorities to determine its family's whereabouts. But the thought of separating from Rex weighed heavily on her. He had been through so much, yet his loyalty and courage had brought them all together. That afternoon, Claire loaded the baby into a makeshift carrier she had found in the house and motioned for Rex to follow her outside. Together, they walked through the quiet town toward the nearest community center. Word of their arrival had spread, and curious townsfolk approached them cautiously. Claire explained the situation, her voice trembling as she recounted Rex's incredible journey. "This dog," she said, her voice breaking with emotion, "sacrificed everything to protect this baby. He's a hero. They both need help." A kind woman from the local shelter stepped forward, her eyes brimming with tears. "We'll make sure they're taken care of," she promised. "But Rex, he belongs with you. It's clear he trusts you more than anyone else." Claire glanced at Rex, who stood close by, his body tense but his eyes soft as they met hers. "You want to stay with me, don't you?" she asked gently, crouching down to meet him at eye level. Rex let out a quiet whine, stepping forward to nuzzle her hand. The next few days were a whirlwind. The baby was taken to a hospital, where doctors confirmed it was malnourished but otherwise healthy. Local news outlets picked up the story, and soon Rex's heroic actions were known far and wide. Offers of adoption for the baby poured in, but Claire ensured the process was handled with care, prioritizing the child's future above all else. Through it all, Rex stayed by Claire's side. He accompanied her on visits to check on the baby and remained a constant source of comfort during the emotionally charged days. Claire found herself relying on him more than she ever thought possible, his presence grounding her in moments of uncertainty. One evening, as they returned home from the hospital, Claire sat beside Rex on the porch steps, the night air cool and filled with the hum of crickets. "You changed everything, you know," she said, her voice soft but steady. "That baby. Me. Our lives are better because of you." Rex rested his head on her lap, his eyes closing as if he understood every word. For the first time he felt not just a protector, but part of something greater, a family. Weeks later, the baby was officially adopted by a loving couple who promised to keep in touch with Claire and Rex. The day they said goodbye was bittersweet, but as the new parents drove away, Claire placed a hand on Rex's head. "We did. Good, didn't we?" she whispered. Rex barked softly, his tail wagging just enough to show he agreed. Together, they turned back toward the house, ready to face whatever came next, together. As days turned into weeks, life began to settle into a peaceful routine for Claire and Rex. The quiet town embraced them both, and Rex, once a scarred fighter hardened by survival, became a local symbol of resilience and loyalty. Children would often stop Claire during her morning walks, eager to pet Rex and hear the story of his bravery. Despite his imposing size and battle-worn appearance, Rex greeted them gently, his amber eyes reflecting a newfound calm. One crisp autumn morning, Claire received an unexpected letter. It was from the family who had adopted the baby. Enclosed was a photo of the child, now healthier and smiling in the arms of its new parents. A handwritten note accompanied it. "Dear Claire and Rex, we can never thank you enough for what you did. This little one has brought so much joy into our lives, and we promise to honor the incredible journey that brought them to us. Rex's courage and your kindness will always be part of our family's story. Please visit any time. You're always welcome." Claire held the photo out to Rex. "Look, buddy," she said with a smile. "They're doing great." Rex sniffed the picture and let out a soft bark, as if he understood. As the seasons changed, so did Rex's role in Claire's life. He became her steadfast companion, joining her on every errand, every hike, and every quiet evening on the porch. The bond between them deepened, built on trust, shared struggles, and unspoken understanding. Claire often marveled at how far they had both come. From two lost souls brought together by fate to a team stronger than either could have imagined. One evening, as they walked through the woods near the edge of town, Rex froze, his ears pricking at a faint sound in the distance. Claire followed his gaze, her heart quickening. "What is it, boy?" she asked. Without hesitation, Rex darted forward, his body low and his movements deliberate. Claire hurried after him, calling his name. She found him near a narrow ravine, standing guard over a small, frightened animal, a stray puppy tangled in the underbrush. Rex looked back at her, his eyes filled with the same determination he had shown the night he found the baby. Claire knelt beside the puppy, carefully freeing it from the brambles. It was thin, shivering, and its dark eyes were wide with fear. "You found another one to save, didn't you?" she said softly, stroking Rex's head. "Looks like we've got some work to do." They brought the puppy home, and over the following weeks, it thrived under their care. Rex took on the role of mentor, teaching the young dog through his calm presence and watchful eyes. Claire couldn't help but laugh as the puppy followed Rex everywhere, mimicking his every move. The three of them became a family, bound not by blood, but by the strength of their shared experiences. The small house that once felt too quiet now echoed with the sounds of joy, playful barks, laughter, and the contented sighs of a dog who had finally found his place in the world. As the sun set one evening, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Claire sat on the porch steps with Rex beside her and the puppy curled at her feet. She reached out, her hand resting on Rex's thick fur. "You've changed so many lives, you know," she said, "mine included." Rex leaned into her touch, his tail thumping softly against the wooden steps. Together, they watched the horizon, the past behind them, and the promise of a brighter future ahead. In that moment, there was no doubt they had found their home, their purpose, and most importantly, each other.